I've always had a fascination with the mysterious and the macabre. As a child, I reveled in horror movies and ghost stories, and my bedroom was adorned with eerie trinkets and unsettling paintings. But there's one memory from my childhood that chills me to my core, a haunting tale that I can never shake from my mind. It all began when I received a gift for my 8th birthday. It was a doll, but not just any doll. This doll was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Her porcelain face was intricately painted with delicate features. Her glassy eyes seemed to pierce through the soul, and her auburn hair cascaded down her back in perfect ringlets. She was dressed in an old-fashioned Victorian gown, the fabric yellowed with age, and her tiny fingers clutched a faded bouquet of fabric flowers. My parents had found the doll in an antique store, and they thought it would be the perfect addition to my collection of creepy oddities. I was thrilled with my new possession and immediately named her Isabella. Little did I know Isabella would become the source of my greatest nightmares. At first, everything seemed normal. I would prop Isabella up on a shelf in my room, surrounded by other sinister playthings. She fit right in with the aesthetic I had cultivated over the years. However, it wasn't long before strange occurrences began to unfold. One night, as I lay in bed reading a horror novel, I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the direction of Isabella. I brushed it off as my imagination, a trick of the mind spurred on by my obsession with the eerie and unknown. But then I heard it again, more distinct this time. It was like the soft rustling of fabric, as if someone were gently stroking Isabella's dress. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest, and squinted into the darkness. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting an eerie glow across the room. My gaze was fixed on Isabella, her eyes seeming to glint in the faint light. I watched in terror as her fingers, one by one, released their grip on the fabric flowers. The bouquet fell to the ground with a muted thud, and Isabella's hand slowly lowered back to her side. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to tear my eyes away from the doll. I wanted to scream, to call out for my parents, but my voice was trapped in my throat. And then, as if sensing my terror, Isabella's head turned slightly, her glassy eyes locking onto mine. I don't know how long I stared at her, frozen in place. But eventually, exhaustion overtook my fear, and I must have drifted into a fitful sleep. The next morning, I convinced myself that it had all been a nightmare, a result of my overactive imagination and my love for horror stories. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella was watching me, that her gaze followed me wherever I went. I even began to hear whispers in the dead of night, faint voices that seemed to be coming from the direction of the doll. I tried to rationalize these experiences, attributing them to stress or lack of sleep. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Isabella had an unsettling aura about her, an energy that seemed to seep into the very walls of my room. As time passed, the occurrences grew more sinister. Objects would go missing, only to reappear in bizarre places, and the whispers evolved into faint giggles and laughter that echoed through the darkness. My once beloved collection of creepy oddities became a source of dread, and I couldn't escape the feeling that Isabella was at the center of it all. One evening, as I sat at my desk trying to concentrate on my homework, a cold breeze swept through the room. I shivered, glancing around for the source of the chill, and that's when I saw it. Isabella's tiny handprint smeared in frost on the window pane. My heart raced as I approached the doll, her porcelain face now contorted into a sinister grin. "Isabella," I whispered, my voice trembling, "what do you want from me?" The air seemed to grow heavy, and the room was suddenly plunged into darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, but when the lights flickered on, Isabella was nowhere to be found. Panic gripped me, and I tore through the room, searching every nook and cranny, but she had vanished without a trace. I was consumed by a sense of dread, a feeling that Isabella's malevolent presence was now free to roam. The whispers grew louder, the laughter more pronounced, and I became convinced that I was losing my grip on reality. My parents grew concerned, but they couldn't understand the true horror that I was experiencing. Then, one fateful night, as I lay in bed paralyzed by fear, Isabella returned. She stood at the foot of my bed, her glassy eyes fixated on mine, and a haunting melody filled the air. It was a hauntingly beautiful tune, one that seemed to seep into my very soul. And then Isabella began to dance. Her porcelain limbs moved with an eerie grace, her feet gliding across the floor as if she were floating on air. I watched, unable to tear my gaze away, as she twirled and swayed to the haunting melody. It was a macabre performance, one that sent shivers down my spine and chilled me to the bone. As the music reached a crescendo, Isabella's movements grew frenetic, her delicate form contorting into grotesque angles. And then, with a final jarring movement, she stopped. The room fell silent, the melody fading into nothingness, and Isabella's glassy eyes locked onto mine one last time before she shattered into 1,000 pieces. I was left trembling, covered in a cold sweat, and utterly terrified. The doll that had haunted my nightmares was gone, but the memory of that night would forever be etched into my mind. To this day I can't explain what happened or how Isabella came to possess such a malevolent spirit, but I know that the horror I experienced was real, a nightmare that played out in the confines of my own room. And though I've grown older and wiser, I'll never forget the haunting presence of Emily's doll, a true horror story that defies explanation and continues to send shivers down my spine.